Quick word before we dive in. Red flags usually go off for me when I hear a student say something like, I believe the Bible is true. Why? Because that statement needs a lot of unpacking. What do we mean by the word true? Historical truth, scientific truth, spiritual truth? And which part of the Bible are we talking about? All of it equally? What about the books that didn't make it into official scripture? Or the fact that some Christian traditions include extra books in their Bibles that others don't? Whose Bible are we even talking about? As you can see, this is a bit of a minefield. So let's try a simple overview just to get our bearings. The Hebrew scriptures didn't drop out of the sky all at once. They started out as a scattered mix of manuscripts, each with its own story. Keep in mind, we don't have any original manuscripts from the authors themselves. None in existence. Only copies of copies, with little additions and edits along the way. It wasn't even until after the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 that Jewish leaders started setting boundaries on which books counted as scripture. And another key point, the Bible wasn't written in English. The Hebrew Bible, or Jewish scriptures, was written mostly in Hebrew with a few sections in Aramaic. The New Testament was written in Greek, not the fancy sort of classical Greek, but the everyday street Greek. It's sometimes called Koine. Jesus himself most likely spoke Aramaic. So what we read in the Gospels is already a translation of his words. In other words, language matters, and translations are never one-to-one. Take Hebrew, for example. Ancient Hebrew manuscripts only used consonants, no vowels, no punctuation. Imagine reading this. You can probably figure it out, but you can also see how things get ambiguous really fast. That's why different manuscripts sometimes read slightly different, and why translation is always an act of interpretation. Now, archaeology gives us some fascinating insights here. For example, a tiny silver amulet from the 6th century BC has, quote, the priestly blessing from the book of Numbers written on it. That tells us how early certain texts are valued and circulated. Then, of course, there are the Dead Sea Scrolls. Most people have heard of that. Discovered in the 1940s. Fragments of almost every book of the Hebrew Bible, older than anything else we have. They confirm a lot, but they also show small variations, reminding us that texts developed in families rather than in a single fixed copy. Now, when we look at the New Testament developed in a similar way. The earliest writings in the New Testament we have are Paul's letters. These were read aloud in communities, copied, and then passed around. Not surprisingly, some people even tried to forge letters in Paul's name, which he complains about in his authentic letters. Over time, other writings like the Gospels and Acts were added, written a few decades after Paul's letters. And then eventually we get the book of Revelation as well. But here's the key. The Bible as we know it today didn't just appear. Early Christians debated for centuries about which books should count. In the 2nd century, a teacher named Marcion tried to cut out the Hebrew scriptures altogether. And what he wanted to do was sort of create his own canon, his own Bible. That forced the church to clarify what it believed belonged in scripture and what it didn't. Eventually, much later by the 4th century, the list of 27 New Testament books was more or less set, though even after that, certain books were still questioned. Fun fact, Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, famously wanted to throw out the letter of James, calling it a letter of straw. He still kept it in, though, just stuck it way at the back. So my point of all this is pretty simple. The Bible didn't come fully formed in the way that we think of it today. It grew throughout time through messy processes of writing, copying, translating, debating, and because of that, nuance really matters. When we talk about the truth or the authority in the Bible, we need to keep all these things in mind.